Good evening, friends, and welcome back to our chess lectures. This is lecture number 6 in our series, and we've taken ourselves so far right up to about the 19th century in chess. What we're discussing is combinational style chess play. This involves tactical chess rather than strategical. The early games in chess history were slam-bang chess. They didn't care much about pawn structures or positions, but they did develop the theory of tactical play, which we are going to be discussing this evening. I have on the chart over here our main tactical themes. I have 12 listed, and I'll just read them off for you, and then we'll be picking them off one at a time. We have the knight fork, the pin, the double attack, discovered attack, the discovered check, the double check, the overworked piece, removal of the guard, clearance, blockade or interference, the X-ray attack, and pawn breakthrough. Now there are many other themes involved in tactical chess, but these are some of the major ones. Remember that in our last talk we discussed that most combinations are a result of either your opponent's error, or that's just a blunder, or a positional error. And we showed some traps that are involved if he makes just an outright blunder, how you can take advantage of it. The important thing in this tactical style of chess is to remember that if you can win the advantage of the exchange, you should go after it. In other words, a rook is stronger than a knight. The rook is stronger than a knight. So if you can win a rook and just give up a knight, then you go for that. If you can win a pawn for no reason at all, you take that pawn, because remember in the ending we discussed the pawn could be promoted to be a queen. So you go after it. The idea of tactical chess is to develop your game with tactical threats so that you may win a piece or you may win the exchange. Now let's discuss the first one, which was the knight fork. And remember, the knight can move around in different, it can go all over the board. It goes up 2 and over 1, always changes color where it's heading for. I assume by now you know the moves. Let's take a little game that looks something like this. And we'll have just our straightforward development of pieces out towards the center. White develops the other knight. This knight comes out, the pawn comes up to free the bishop. This pawn comes up to free the bishop. And say white can castle. Or instead of castling here, if this knight moves up here, let's look at our threat. The knight now is threatening to go down 2 and over 1, to take this pawn. And remember we said that that's the weakest pawn on the board, because the only piece that's protecting it is the king. And we now have 2 pieces attacking that pawn. We have the knight and the bishop both coming in on this pawn. So if black were to make some move like pushing the knight away, we would come in with the knight, and that would be a knight fork, because the knight cannot be taken by the king. The king is not allowed to move into check. And what the knight in fact is doing is attacking the queen and the rook at the same time. You see that? So the queen naturally will want to move. You don't want to lose the queen. The queen will move, and white will be able to win the rook. So when you have a knight fork and you're attacking 2 major pieces, it means that you're going to win the exchange, is what we say. The queen will save herself. The rook will go. Now mind you, this knight may be lost eventually, but it'll be an exchange of a knight for a rook. In this case, white has won the more valuable piece. And that basically is what a knight fork is. A knight fork, or a fork by any piece, is when one piece is attacking 2 pieces at the same time. One of them has to move in order to save itself, and the other piece is lost. The most common example was the one I just showed you, where you get 2 pieces on that very weak F7 square, which is protected only by the king. And now we come to the second tactical motive, which is the pin. We mentioned briefly last week the theme of the pin. Let's just get some pieces out here. We don't have to do it in order. I'll give you an idea of the situation. There. Here, both of black's bishops are pinning white's knights to their square. Now, why do we say they're being pinned? Because this knight cannot move at all because of the check. You're not allowed to have your king go into check. So this knight is pinned. We call that an absolute pin. This bishop is pinning this knight. Now this knight is allowed to move, isn't it? There's no law in chess to say you cannot lose your queen. So bishop takes queen is a possibility. However, no one wants to lose their queen. So we call this a relative pin. See, an absolute pin because that cannot move. A relative pin because we don't want to lose our queen, therefore that knight is held down. Now, pins are very good tactical themes to use in the opening of a game. And the idea being that I'll play a little opening here and we'll study it. The idea is as you develop your pieces towards the center, you want to build up tension and pressure on the enemy. And the way you do that is to have these tactical things. Now, white comes out with a pin. You notice this is a relative pin. This knight cannot move or the queen will be taken. So we call that a relative pin. If black were to castle in this position, then the queen knight over here would come up to d5 and pile up on this knight. Now there are two pieces on this knight. Black would like to take this knight, but it would lose its queen. So this knight, when you get a pin on a piece, you try to double up on it, or put 3 pieces on it if you can. But you pile up on the pin. This creates pressure and tension. There's no way in this case that white can relieve the double attack of the pin. Black can. If black were to push the knight away, this is what happens. We take with our knight and we say check. He doesn't want to just give up a knight, so he takes back with the pawn. And now this pawn is gone. The rook has to move to save itself. But look what's happened to the king position. The king position is completely devoid of any protection at all. And this is what can happen if you use pins correctly. You pile up on the pinned piece and then you start exchanging so that, especially if it's a castle king, the castle king side is ripped open and then it's open for attack. Let's look at that situation again. See if you understand it. It looked like this. Here was the pin on the knight, holding the knight down because black doesn't want to lose the queen. White comes up and doubles up on the pin, which means that an exchange here will open up the king side. You see how that works? Now, there are very strange things that can happen, though. There are several traps that occur in the opening because of relative pins. Sometimes you can sacrifice your queen to the astonishment of your opponent. And we have little gamelets like this. White opens up in the center, so does black. White develops a knight attacking the pawn. Black will, say, defend the pawn there. White develops another knight. This knight comes out right here. White develops a bishop, our standard type opening. And if black now pins this knight, now remember that's a relative pin, isn't it? Black comes out and says, that's a pretty good pin because he cannot take my queen. But what happens if we push the bishop away and he comes back here, and then we take this? Let's see now. Or if we don't, if we take this, and if black is greedy, black now takes the queen, and black should feel as though he's going to win the game, he's won the queen. Then white comes in with a check. King cannot take because it's protected by this knight. The king cannot go here because of this knight. So the king can only go up one square, and this knight delivers checkmate. The king is in check and cannot get out of check. The king cannot go here because from white to black the knight can take. The king cannot go here because of this bishop. Can't go here because of this bishop. Cannot go here because of this knight. Cannot take the bishop because of this knight, and he's in check. So although white has lost the queen, black has ended up in checkmate. And that's because black was so sure that the relative pin on this knight would work. But that's why I say be careful of relative pins. In relative pins, you are able to move the knight and attack and give your queen up if you have a mating net. But the mating nets are not always there. So both relative and absolute pins are of great value. When you develop your pieces in the opening, develop them towards the center, and then do them in such a way that you can perhaps create pins especially with your bishops. Now, on this side of the board, we have a position which is known as the double attack. This is our third tactical theme. The double attack is when one piece is attacking two other pieces, and it's something like a pin, like a fork, except you're not directly attacking two pieces at one time. Just study this position and see if you can see a move with white's queen. A move with white's queen that will threaten black with checkmate, and by saving himself from checkmate, black will have to lose a piece. Again, the double attack, white will move the queen in such a way where he'll threaten checkmate in this position and attack another piece at the same time. The position is queen to d4, backed up by this bishop in the corner. The two pieces are working on the long diagonal, threatening checkmate down here. See, the king cannot take the queen because of this bishop. Now that's fine. We're threatening checkmate. Black has to get out of the threat. Black can get out of the threat by advancing the pawn. But the point of the double attack is that we are not only threatening checkmate, but we are also threatening this knight. You see that? So black gets out of the checkmate, which is the immediate solution, and then white wins a piece for nothing at all. That's the double attack. The double attack is when one piece threatens the opponent's piece, but also threatens something more valuable, which is like a checkmate. The most immediate threat has to be averted, in which the other piece which is attacked it can be had for nothing at all. That's the double attack. And now we'll go to our next tactical theme. And through the magic of television, we're able to set up our boards with new positions immediately. Let's look over briefly what we've done so far. We're studying our tactical themes. We've discussed the knight fork. We've discussed two types of pin. We've discussed the absolute pin and the relative pin. We've discussed the double attack. And now, I take this off this position, we'll look at what is called the discovered attack. The discovered attack simply refers to moving a piece in such a way that we are threatening two things at once. Something like the double attack, except it's discovered. For instance, the bishop and the queen are both controlling the long diagonal. Now, if I clear this knight away, I'm threatening mate on the move. You see, check, the king can't escape. That's checkmate. That's what I'm threatening on the move. So where do I clear my knight to? I could clear my knight here and say check. But the king would eventually move here and then escape out through here. So we wouldn't achieve too much with that. So we want to find a better place to move our knight and still threaten the mate. Now this is what is sometimes not easy to see. The knight can move back here, see, from a black to a white. We are now threatening the mate, but we are also attacking the queen with the knight. You see that? We are threatening the queen with the knight. So in order to avoid the mate, black has to lose. See, we can move that up and get rid of that threat. This is over here. That would be better over here, in which case we could take it like this and say check. But we can get out of the mate threat, but the queen will be lost. Or if we move the king over here and we had it in a situation, no, that would be check. But the discovered attack is precisely moving a piece, attacking something else with it, but you're discovering another threat along this long diagonal. So that is like a double attack. You're attacking down here and you're attacking here. But it's a discovery of this attack. This is the main one to get out of for black, and the queen will be lost. That's your discovered attack. Now let's look at our next theme. And it's one of the most popular tactical themes to use in chess. We'll go over to this board. And we have here what is called a discovered check. And now a discovered check is just like a discovered attack, except we say check when we do it. Let's see what can happen in a situation like this. Let's just first analyze it a bit. We see the two rooks in the back rank. The king has been moved up here. The first thing we can notice is that the king on this rank with this bishop is not being protected by anything. So we do see we can move this rook down and we can say check. The king has to move and we win the bishop. Now one idea of our tactical themes, of course, is to win pieces. But does the king have to move? No, this rook can come up here. Now we can't take the bishop because the rook will take the rook. This rook has stopped the check and has also protected this bishop. But now here's where our discovered check comes in. Watch this. Rook takes rook. Check. King takes rook. Now we're set up to win a piece with a discovered attack, which is also a discovered check. Here's the rook that's going to do the checking. We've drawn the king into the file where the white rook is. We can move this bishop away to say check. Where do we move it? Naturally, we'll move it all the way down here to attack the bishop. This bishop can't be taken because the king is in check. The king has to get out of check. And by getting out of check, somehow, black then loses the bishop. And white has won a piece. You see, let's look at that again so you can see what has transpired and the use of the now we have here a double attack and a discovered check. What we want is to win this bishop. In order to win the bishop, we do it with a discovered check. The king has to be drawn over here. We come down and say check. In order to save the bishop right away, the rook has to come up to save it. This is what draws the king over into the file. Rook takes rook. King naturally has to take back or be down a rook. And then we have the discovered attack on the bishop, but it's also a discovered check. The king has to get out of check, and bishop takes bishop, winning a piece. The discovered check is one of the most powerful themes on the board, tactical themes. Quickly, I'm going to set up this board, and we'll look at our next major theme, which is not only a discovered check and a double attack, but it is probably the most lethal weapon that we have in our arsenal, and that's called the double check. Double check is when you're attacking the king with two pieces, and each piece is saying check. Now in that case, the only thing that the enemy king can do is move the king. The enemy king is under double attack with two pieces. There's no point in trying to capture one of the pieces because the other one is checking also. I'll show you exactly how this works in this little gamelet. Now we're thinking of the double check. Let's play a little game like this. Pawn opens to king 4, or e4 as we say, occupying the center, which is a standard opening as we know. Black in this game plays what's called the caro-can. We're used to seeing the double king pawn openings. But remember I said there are many ways of achieving equality in the center. And here in the caro-can opening, black is going to attack this square like this, so that if there's an exchange, black has the center. Although it's not a central move, it has a central meaning. White continues, gets the broad center with the pawns, as we said we should. Black continues, pawn to d5. Now, if white were to capture and black were to capture, black would have a nice even game. Both would have, it would look like this. You see. But white does not want to capture and allow that to happen. It wants rather to develop a piece, protect this in case that's captured, and develop a piece. If you capture early in the opening, you're wasting time. You should keep the tension, develop your forces, and you develop them in such a way that you are protecting something that is being attacked. So, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, and let's put black's knight out here, attacking this knight. Now this is a strange little game, and don't forget we're playing back in around the 1700s now. Nowadays we'd probably go knight takes knight to double these pawns, or we'd even move the knight back. But in this little gamelet, the queen came out here to protect the knight. The idea being that if knight takes knight, queen takes, then the queen will be centralized. And this is the way they were playing in these in the early days of chess. Black then, true to the style of tactical chess, goes pawn out to e5. He doesn't mind this being captured. You can go queen takes queen, and this also frees both black's bishops right away. Pawn takes pawn. White says, I don't care. But black, instead of taking the queen, comes out here and says check, thereby taking this pawn back with the queen. We have to get out of check, which we do with the bishop. The queen takes. Now, black looks as though he has a very, very strong position. Black has developed two pieces, and the two pieces are attacking the knight. The knight is only protected by one piece, the queen. So there's two pieces on the knight, only one protecting it. Right? Now what is white going to do? White doesn't even try to protect the knight. white castles queenside. But you can see what's happening. The rook and the queen on this open file. This thing. Black, however, feels that force is the most important thing and can't see anything else coming. Black says, fine, I'll win a knight for nothing. And he goes, knight takes knight. And now the fireworks begin. Now we have not only a double attack coming up, but we have a discovered check, and not only is it a discovered check, but it is also a double check. I don't know if you found it yet. Don't forget, white is behind a knight. Down force. But it was calculated. Not only is he down a knight, but he's going to give up his queen. Moves right down there with the check. The king has to take the queen. Can't get out of it. King says, fine, I'm up a knight, now I'm up a queen. And now we have the discovered check. I can move this bishop and say check with the rook. So where's the best place to move the bishop? I could move the bishop here and say check and win the queen. But here is our theme that we're discussing now. The double check. Check with the bishop, check with the rook. White has given up two pieces, a queen and a knight, and is now saying double check. There's only one. It's no good to stop the check here because there's still a check with the rook. The king has to move when there's a double check, and that's the whole idea. The king has only two places to move, here and here. If the king moves in here, the rook comes down with checkmate. Notice it's protected by the bishop. Protected by the bishop, and cannot take. King cannot take. The king cannot come out because of this bishop. If the king were to, after the double check, were to move out here, we have a lovely checkmate in this position. The bishop now is protected by this rook, and the king cannot take it. The king cannot move out here because of the bishop. The king cannot come back here because of the rook. And that's checkmate. So here we have a case of double check. Remember, the king has to move. You can give up as many pieces as you want if you can see a double check coming up in a mating threat. There's another little gamelet I'd like to show you next time. But briefly, what we have looked at right now are these tactical themes. The knight fork, the pin, the double attack, the discovered attack, the discovered check, and finally, the double check. And we will later cover all the other tactical themes as we develop our series. And I'll see you then. Thank you.